You've had a checkoff program since 1922, several of the states. You've had the Beef Industry Council since 1963. This industry has always worked together to promote their products. I got involved back in 1984. Contrary to popular opinion, I didn't write the first checkoff for the beef industry in 1922. Back in 1975, the industry came together to try to write some checkoff legislation. There was one Senate bill, but there were 6 different House bills. Each of them had a little different provisions, promoted by some different interests. On October 2nd, 1975, H.R. 7656 passed the House. But look at the vote numbers, 229 to 189. There wasn't a consensus in this industry. Look in the Senate. You had 47 yeas to 36 nays. There wasn't a consensus here. We had a conference report between the House and the Senate that had to agree to a bunch of stuff because none of the bills conformed with each other. We had an assessment rate of a percentage of the market price. We couldn't agree on whether we should hold people liable for not paying the assessment. There are a number of things in the bill that were problems. It was signed into law on May 8th, 1976. We needed 2/3 voting to pass it. We ended up with 57%. Failed. So what do? We went back in and we said, you know what, we're going to change it from 2/3 to 50% passage rate. Well, you guys are bullheaded. The industry said, you know what, we don't like that bill. You changed it from 2/3 to 50%, you got 35% voting in favor of it. So the industry as a whole was not behind that program. The Beef Industry Council and the National Cattlemen's Association got together and decided they need a piece of legislation that would pass, not only through Congress, but be passed by producers. So what we did in the Beef Promotion and Research Act of '85 is we changed a number of things. We created qualified state beef councils out of the programs that you had in the states. We actually used them to collect the assessment. We gave them a credit for the assessments that they were being paid under their state legislation. We changed the rate of assessment. The rate in the previous bill was so confusing, nobody knew what the assessment rate was going to be on a head of cattle. If people can't figure out what the assessment's going to be when they sell their cattle, they're not going to vote for this thing. So we changed that. We made it $1. Today we would have liked to have made it $3. But back then you weren't going to get $3. 50 cents of it can go to the state beef councils. So it made it easy. People could understand what they were going to pay under the checkoff. We created the operating committee. We have state programs and we have national programs. And the only way to ensure that those dollars are spent in coordination is to bring those two groups together. It is a partnership between the state beef councils and a national program. 10 members of the Federation of State Beef Councils. Wherever that is located, used to be at BIC, it's at NCBA now. It is the state beef councils that determine their representatives on the operating committee. 10 members of the beef board. Under the old law, the beef board took all the money and decided how they were going to spend it. Understand, that failed twice. And if you don't think, and this may raise some hackles out there, but if you don't think that the state beef councils weren't concerned about the old legislation and taking all the money, you're crazy. So what did we do? We created the operating committee, which allowed state beef councils some input into how the dollars were going to be spent. You did that so we could get passage. Selection of board members. In the old bill, we had general farm organization. Anybody could nominate. You didn't even really have to show any credentials. In the new piece of legislation, you had to be an eligible organization. You had to be certified by the secretary to nominate people to the Cattlemen's Beef Board. In the referendum, we went back to a 50% plus one majority of all those who voted in the referendum. 1988, it passed with 79%. Remember, previous order got 37%. Cattlemen said they wanted these dollars spent in coordination. In the legislation that we created in '85, we created some definitions. Established national nonprofit industry governed organizations. Those were organizations that could contract for funding from the Cattlemen's Beef Board Operating Committee. They didn't want to create new bureaucracies. Let's use the resources we have out there. They were obviously a 501c3, 5 or 6, governed by a board of directors representing the cattle or beef industry, and were active and ongoing at the time of the act. You had the BIC, you had NCA, you had the foundation, you had resources out there, use them. eligible organization. It was designed to define those organizations who could nominate to the Secretary. Now understand, the Secretary of Agriculture just can't pluck anybody off the street and put them in as a Cattlemen's Beef Board member. They got to be nominated by an organization. So we defined who those organizations could be. Qualified State Beef Council. This is probably the best thing we did. We took all of those beef councils out there that were already collecting money, already had established staffs, already had resources, and we qualified them. We made them submit applications to the Cattlemen's Beef Board to be qualified so they could collect the funds. You didn't have two collection mechanisms out there. So we designed this thing to work in coordination with the state beef councils and the national program. The Federation. At the time, the Federation was the Beef Industry Council of the National Livestock and Meat Board. BIC had been around since '63. They had a staff of people who were out promoting beef. The importance was that it was the Federation of State Beef Councils. It is the Beef Council that creates the partnership with the Cattlemen's Beef Board. The Beef Councils are the ones who send representatives to the operating committee. The Beef Councils are the ones who are responsible for collection and compliance in the states. But at the time, the Federation of State Beef Councils was at the Beef Industry Council, National Livestock and Meat Board. So in the order that was issued by the Secretary of Agriculture, it talks about the Federation being the Beef Industry Council or any successor organization. In 86 through 96, people fought about whether Cattlemen's Beef Board could have committees, and we had healthy debate about how this program would operate. It collected money. It implemented programs on a national level. As we were doing that, it created some problems. Because you had several organizations that were qualified for money, you had a lot of competition for funding. The National Cattlemen's Foundation wanted money. NCA wanted money. The BIC wanted money. Put the operating committee in the middle. There wasn't one voice. There wasn't one plan. The state beef councils got caught in the middle because you had organizations out there looking for funding with no common purpose, no common plan. There was a lack of direction. There was a lack of efficiency. We had overlapping programs between the NCA, the Beef Industry Council, and there were too many people out there speaking. The operating committee struggled to prioritize funding. It became a beauty pageant, in effect. And quite frankly, the state beef councils, because remember, they have money on the state level, and they send 10 representatives to the operating committee. They were caught in the middle. You had all these organizations going after their money, whether it be on the state level or the national level. So in 1996, there was a merger. NCA and the National Livestock and Meat Board were merged to form the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. They became the successor organization. The Federation was merged into NCBA. CBB was not merged because they are a quasi-governmental entity. They were appointed by the Secretary of Agriculture to carry out the purposes of the Beef Promotion and Research Act of 1985. They could not be merged in. So they are separate and continue to be separate to this day. What were the reasons for the merger? One voice, one plan. They wanted to create focus for the program. We had a long-range plan that could be implemented by organizations on a state and national level. We had what we call a budget committee. We still have a budget committee. We had joint program committees. We had issues relating to producer communications. In the order, producer communications is allocated separately to both the operating committee and the beef board. We needed to bring that together so we didn't have 5 different programs. We looked at industry coordination, both on the state and national level, and with policy and checkoff. There are issues that affect the checkoff that are policy related. We can say we don't like that, but when the FDA makes statements about beef, somebody needs to deal with that. And the research and the information they use to deal with that probably comes from the checkoff. We then got into a period of time when the checkoff was challenged by outside forces. You had LMA and some producers, South Dakota, filing a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the beef checkoff program. We spent 6 years fighting this battle. The industry got together and fought that battle, and they won. It was upheld as a valid use of government speech. We did everything right in the development and implementation of the program. Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of the program. The other thing it did was it allowed qualified state beef councils. The Supreme Court upheld the process we use for qualifying state beef councils. So we provided at least another layer of protection for the state beef councils. And by the way, your checkoff program provided protection for all of the other national checkoff programs that are out there. Not only was the mushroom program reinstated as a constitutional checkoff program, but the dairy program had also been challenged. And as a result of the Supreme Court decision in the beef case, the dairy program was upheld. But now we're in a period of time when the industry is changing. On the policy side, we have several voices. We have state beef councils comprised of representatives from several different organizations, competing situations within the beef councils and on the CBB. We also have intense scrutiny about how we spend our money, not only from people outside the industry, animal rightists, vegan nutritionists, but internally we have increased scrutiny. And it's important that you understand that Cattlemen's Beef Board represents everybody who pays into the checkoff. Importers, producers who don't belong to NCBA, producers who do belong to NCBA, producers who don't belong to any organization. There's debate within the industry about what we ought to do with the checkoff, whether we ought to raise it to $2, whether we ought to change the requirement for established national nonprofit industry governed organizations. That's a healthy debate. The guiding principles of this program was a partnership between the Cattlemen's Beef Board and the state beef councils. I represented the checkoff since the inception of the program. This program has done more good for this industry than almost any other checkoff program out there. We have to recognize that the landscape in the industry on the policy side has changed. We need to learn to deal with that.